Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first of a series of virtual town hall meetings. My name is Cindy Dodds, and I am ACSI's Professional Development Director. Our schools and school leaders have certainly entered into uncharted territory over the past couple of weeks, but we also believe it's an unprecedented opportunity for our Christian schools to shine. At ACSI, we have carefully considered the challenges you are facing as leaders. These town hall meetings provide a venue for you to hear what others are doing as they confront the current challenges, and they provide you the opportunity to get your questions answered among colleagues and friends. Today's focus is on the tuition question many of you are receiving. Our hope is to inspire you to finish your school year strong by fulfilling the agreement you made with parents. Today, we will be introducing you to our speaker, Dr. Jay Ferguson, and a panel of school leaders, Chuck Gillum, Dr. Mark Stanton, Josh Keegan, and Harriet Neal, who will briefly share their experiences related to today's topic. We also have Dr. Tom Cathy and Philip Scott from our ACSI Legal Legislative Office. We will then open the floor for questions. If you have not already submitted questions via email, please begin submitting your questions now and throughout the meeting as those questions arise. You can use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. These questions are being monitored, and we will be presenting those to our panel. Before we move on to the introduction of our speaker, I would like to introduce you to my co-host and ACSI Vice President of USA, Dr. David Balick.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Great teaming up with you for this town hall. I want to say a special word of thanks to you and to our Learning and Development Manager, Sarah Longcarp, for all of your hard work in getting us ready for today. Welcome, everyone. Like most of you, I'm hunkering down here at home in Birmingham, Alabama. I hope you're hanging in there, that you're doing well, staying healthy, staying positive. One day, we'll be able to tell our grandchildren we survived the great toilet paper shortage of 2020, right? In all seriousness, years ago, the great writer and theologian A.W. Tozer made this profound statement. He said this: a scared world needs a fearless church. Isn't that good? A scared world needs a fearless church. Like a fireman runs to the fire, the church needs to respond to crises around us and be the hands and feet of Jesus. Amen? That's what you have been doing. That's what you are doing. I want to thank you for that. Say thank you for all that you're doing. Opportunities like we have today to gather are a great way for us to remind each other that while it looks as though things are out of control, behind the scenes there is a God who has not surrendered his authority. Amen? Let's pray together, and then I'm going to introduce Dr. Jay Ferguson. Let's pray. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They're new every morning. Great is your faithfulness, Lord. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Father, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to gather today. Thank you for each one represented on this Zoom, for the way in which they are serving their parents, their students, their staff, their faculty, all around the world, Father, as your hands and your feet. Bless them. Father, protect them, that we would know that we know, even in this moment, here today, that even though we can't see the whole path ahead, you give us enough light to take the next step. Father, we trust you for your continued guidance and provision for such a time as this. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Well, we're going to hear first from Dr. Jay Ferguson. Dr. Ferguson is the headmaster of Grace Community School in Tyler, Texas. He practiced law for 10 years and in 2002 joined Grace as development director before assuming the headmaster role in 2003. He serves on ACSI's national board, and he speaks and writes extensively on Christian education and training children, including his weekly posts at Jay's blog. And as a matter of fact, he authored ACSI's most recent blog that just came out, Telling the Story, a resource to share with school families. I encourage you to read that. Jay, thanks so much for joining us today, brother. We'd like for you to share over the next few minutes about your experiences and specifically begin to address the title, today's title question of our town hall. What about tuition? What about tuition?
Sure. Well, thanks, David and Cindy, for asking me to be a part of this discussion. And I'm just going to make a few comments to kind of frame up the rest of our discussion today with the rest of our panelists. You know, I, like you, am not an expert on virtual schooling. None of us are. It's something different from even online education, even assuming that you were offering some form of that before the coronavirus era as part of your services. I don't think any of us, even though schools who do online learning are experts in the kind of delivery that we've all had to whip up basically from thin air over the past few weeks. This has been an extraordinary season for Christian schooling, a season that none of us could have imagined just 3 weeks ago. If you had probably told any of us that we would have been shutting down our school and going to a virtual learning platform 2 weeks ago, we'd have told them they were out of their mind. It's remarkable to me how fast the world has changed, faster than at any time in my reckoning since 9/11, and more dramatically for our schools and for us leaders than at that time. You know, our families, like those of us gathered here in this webinar, have been through a season of global trauma, and we're grieving what we've lost. I read an article by Andy Crouch and others yesterday called Leading Beyond the Blizzard, Why Every Education or Every Organization is Now a Startup, suggesting that we're in for what he called a 18-month mini ice age rather than a small storm, one that will fundamentally change the way that Christian ministries and other 501c3s do business. Others suggest that several things like virus testing that we've seen with result times in 45 minutes rather than days will keep us from quarantining people for weeks, and that advances already showing in treating the virus that these things will be game changers and that will put us in a very different position just weeks or a month from now than we are right now. But when you have this kind of uncertainty and it's coupled with school families who even now are being laid off, losing their businesses, and are having to stay home with kids with their schools closed, it's no wonder that families begin manifesting their fear and or uncertainty in a variety of ways, including requesting refunds for tuition or tuition breaks. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. Refund requests are based upon a couple of fallacies of understanding what we do as schools. First, there's a belief that in some sense, part of the value schools provide is as a babysitting service or childcare. And I'm specifically speaking about K-12 schools as opposed to EECs, but as a place where teachers take care of my kids during the day while I work or do other things, and that this is a significant portion of the value of a school. The tacit argument goes that if you're not babysitting my child, then you should refund at least a portion of the amount of childcare so I can find it somewhere else, assuming that I can even find it in this culture right now. The second fallacy is a misunderstanding of how school finances work, a misunderstanding of fixed versus variable costs, particularly at this time of the school year. The argument goes, since your lights aren't on and you're not playing baseball, you must be saving tons of money. So how about giving some of it back to us? I want to address the second fallacy first so I can finish on the first one, which I think is more important. The second can be cleared up with just an understanding of how schools work. 60 to 70% of most schools' costs are people. Most of those are faculty. 8 weeks out from the end of the school year to 10 weeks, which is where we are now, and living in uncertain times where it's quite possible we could be back in school before the year's out. And while teachers are still teaching, albeit in other ways, to children with whom they've spent the whole year building a relationship and gaining ground educationally, is not a situation where we can simply lay off or terminate our workforce without causing significant damage to the students that we're teaching. And while we may save some dollars on our light bills, our co-curricular activities, for most of us, those costs are offset by fees and admissions gate that we won't be realizing either. I think by the end of the year, even if we're not back in school, we're just not going to see our schools flush with cash from an unexpected windfall. So to give a refund at this point would be foolhardy. And I suspect very few banks are cutting their fees, or doctors cutting their prices, or restaurants cutting the cost of their food simply because they're now delivering those products and services in virtual ways and closing their lobbies and closing their restaurants to sit down traffic. So to suggest that we do so denies economic reality. And the fact is, we have a contract with our families, and the contract provides that we provide education for them. And as long as we're providing that education, which most of us are doing through virtual schooling, we're providing the benefit of the bargain of the contract. With regard to the first fallacy or misunderstanding, certainly a tangential benefit of school is that I don't have to find separate childcare for my child while I'm working if they're in class. This, however, negates the primary value of Christian education, that of providing an outstanding education of children from a biblical perspective so that they can live out God's calling on their lives, glorifying God and enjoying Him forever. And so I want to finish my remarks here because I think while you're always going to have some families who aren't going to get it and who are going to ask for a refund, it's here that we can really distinguish ourselves from other education providers and demonstrate value, all as an act of worship of the Lord and as an act of service to our school families. First, our families are in a time of tremendous upheaval. The fact that we're injecting normalcy and routine into our children's lives is of tremendous value in and of itself. I'm receiving outstanding feedback from our parents in terms of appreciation for all the hard work our teachers have put into their lessons and the way that they're interacting with kids and pouring into it. And I know you are too. So often our families' perspectives of school, I've observed this, especially high school, are mediated by their 15 or 16-year-old children, kids who are a notoriously unreliable source of information. I mean, we don't pick political candidates or stock portfolios based upon our 15-year-olds' perceptions, but parents make educational choices for their children based upon those perceptions all the time. We've got a tremendous opportunity right now for parents to peel the curtain back and to allow us to bring the quality that we bring to our school in our schools every day, this time into our parents' living rooms, as well as establishing meaningful teacher-parent relationships that transcend what happens inside our brick and mortar buildings. But your teachers have to bring their A game, and they have to bring it every single day. In addition, and we can talk about this in Q&A, repurposing some of our hourly staff, like our administrative assistants, into what are essentially virtually family community group leaders, reaching into families' lives, praying for them, routing concerns, and helping to meet needs, allow us to use those with extra bandwidth, our staff members, to love our families in their time of need in extraordinary ways and generate tremendous extra value. We are, in this moment, quite frankly, offering something families can't get anywhere else. I was texting with a friend of mine, a doctor father in our school, and we were just messing around. And he was kidding me when we announced that we were going to virtual learning. He texted me and he said, "I'm just checking on what kind of rebate we'll be getting for participating in this homeschool experience. Hope you and your girls are well, and we appreciate your leadership." And I quickly texted back, "Are you kidding? You all are going to school and getting algebra and English while kids in other schools are getting basically nothing? That's got to be worth at least a 40 to 50 point advantage on Fletcher's SATs." The kid's name was Fletcher. "I'm thinking about raising my last quarter prices." We were just joking with each other, but as an article that I was reading in the Wall Street Journal the other day makes clear, in most public schools, virtual instruction either will not happen or it won't count because it's an equity, equal protection issue. Some kids don't have access to internet and equipment to get online, so you can't instruct some and not others. So it can't count without assessment, it's just enrichment. This is going to be a really, really difficult issue for American education, a sad issue and a hard one, which is another reason why we all need to get back in school as quickly as possible. But while it lasts, the value of what you offer presented from a Christian perspective is never greater as compared to what your children could get elsewhere. If we continue to do what we do best, providing outstanding education, as my pastor said, being aggressively present in our families' lives while we are physically distant, if we are loving well, we will significantly minimize the call for refunds because they will know the value of what we're offering. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the perspective you've given us today, Jay. You've given us some great points of value to be able to share with our parents. David, I'm going to pass it to you so you can introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Cindy. And we have a number of questions coming in right now, and we are anxious to get to them, rest assured. But before we do, I want to give our panel members a chance to introduce themselves and share a few words about how they're handling this issue in their school. Chuck Gillum from Eagles Landing in Georgia. Welcome, brother. Why don't you start us off?
Thanks, David. And thanks, Jay. That was powerful and helpful. And I think we're all asking that same question is what's the value proposition right now for Christian education? And what an incredible time it is for all of us to, in many ways, showcase all the things that we're doing within our schools and to distance ourselves even from the competition around us. So just quickly, I'll give you the context for our school. We're on the south side of Atlanta, and every state's different. I know every community is different in how they're dealing with this. But just from our standpoint, our governor has closed our schools through April the 6th, and that falls during spring break for us. So we're planning to remain closed through April the 13th. We've been closed for a week and a half, and we'll be closed for an additional week and a half, total of 3 weeks, unless things change, which they very well may. We currently service about 1,000 students in 7 different counties around the Atlanta area. Some of those counties have been hit hard. So that's an ever-changing issue for us as well as we try to navigate what that's going to look like for our students. But just to give a 30,000-foot view of what we're doing, we transitioned to distance learning last week. And our first week was all about orienting our families and our students and our staff to what this was going to look like. And so this week we're fully implementing our online platform. And what we decided to do was go with as much structure as we possibly can for our students. We're using 2 main platforms, Google Classroom and Zoom. And for our 6th through 12th grade, they're actually in class 3 days a week, and they're going through each of their class periods, 1st through 7th hour. We're on a traditional schedule. It is abbreviated somewhat, but we wanted our parents in particular and our students to feel that structure. And so far, this is day 2. We finished up with doing that with 6th through 12th grade. So far, things have gone really well with that. Our lower school students, pre-K through 5th grade, they're using Zoom as a platform, Facebook as a platform, And what we're doing in those situations is we're trying to give them as much academic content as we possibly can. We know they're having to work some on their own outside of the classroom, but our constant messaging to our families is the building is closed, but we are moving forward. And so our intention right now is we're not refunding anything in regards to tuition. We're obviously working with individual families as they come to us and working with them with financial aid. But K-3 through 12, we're moving forward. And if this thing is through the end of the year, we'll continue to message that same way and push forward. And as Jay said earlier, this is the time when our staff members are stepping up. It's been amazing to watch what they have done. And this is also the time where you're seeing some areas of weakness that we may have to address when you go through contract season. But as of right now, it's been a blessing to watch how they have responded in the fantastic job of pushing our students forward. So that's where we're at.
Excellent. Thanks, Chuck. Mark Stanton, if you'd start your video, brother, and you're next.
Hello, everyone. Mark Stanton. I am from about an hour and 15 minutes west of New York City and about an hour or so north of Philadelphia within eastern Pennsylvania. And I am the head of school that's there. One of the things that has been really important to us and that focusing in with our teachers exactly is that one is constant reminder of what our mission is. And that as we're doing that, so no matter what kind of format we're doing, we're still focusing on it. And we've been communicating that for forever since we've been to school, but especially now. I think one of the things that's been important for us, because this was now our week and a half into school, we're off until at least the 16th per state mandate. In fact, our governor has just shut down anything for us within our county here. And so we're not even allowed out unless we're running or walking and keeping our distance. So it's even getting a little tighter. One of the things as we were moving into this, we had several systems that were already there. We had a learning management system. We were able to connect with Zoom and things because of webinars and things that we had done. So essentially what we've done is consolidated those tools. Every grade level is going to be a little different. So kindergarten obviously is different in how it looks than an 11th grade since we're a K through 12 school. And additionally, we have a PK. So we started communicating this, and we always have transparency. This is what our teachers are working on. This is what our students are working on. This is what our parents can know about, and then me as an administration and my other administrative team. And so in that, and of course, we've learned some things. A few things that we have found that's been really helpful for us is that we are really specific on focusing on the tools, and we're focused on learning. And so when we've essentially moved from a brick and mortar school to a remote learning school, we've focused on what those tools were. And we spent a few days before we switched over in making sure that everyone was communicating what was going to happen within their area. And so we had Zoom meetings that trained parents and retrained students and helped teachers go through these tools. And so we had those through our IT person and myself, and we had for a couple days to make sure we're that. One of the things that we've also been requiring is that we have a Google Sheet, and that's a consolidation of when anybody who's live. And so if you're going to have a live meeting, you put it on that sheet so the parents can have that, because navigating a virtual space is much different than navigating your hallways. And so that seemed to be something our students have really relied on, and parents as well, because reading in the LMS and with their internet slowing down because everybody in the country is on it has been a bit of a challenge. But as an administrative, we also hold office hours. And so every teacher has an office hour that's virtual. I just get on, and if somebody wants to pop on and ask a question, they can have that, because part of what we found as a Christian school that's really important is that we maintain that connection with folks. And although it is virtual, having them hear your voice, having them have that reassurance and somewhat of a sense of normalcy. And so that has been extremely helpful for us as we moved into this. And then for our students, every teacher is supposed to have a couple live lessons with them. Most of it is just more like a flipped classroom. So essentially we moved from a classroom in the building and we moved to a flipped classroom type of pedagogy. So it's been really interesting and been a learning curve as well. What's been exciting is just seeing this school rally around each other and watching, jumping in a classroom of fifth graders and them chatting and being able to have this. And so it's actually been a godsend to us. And so in some ways, and has also been that challenge because I used to have dark hair about 2 weeks ago. And so now I think I've gained at least 10 years on my life. But I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to shine as a school and how we actually live and care and are deeply committed to our families. So I've been praying for an opportunity to being able to do that, and I wish we'd have never had to do this, and I'm looking forward to being back in because I miss them all greatly. And thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate being able to share about what our school's done because I'm pretty excited about it.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Mark. Great to have you on the panel. And over to Harriet Neal, who is coming to us from the great state of South Carolina. Harriet.
Hi, it's good to be here. I'm from the world of early education, which is entirely different than everything else we've been hearing about. And at first, when we talked about virtual education, it seemed like it didn't even fit for us. How do you do that when you encourage teachers to stay away from technology as much as they can and to let the children be involved in real situations? But the more we thought about it as reality set in, we realized that we needed to do something for these children and their parents. We needed to be there to connect with them. So the teachers we encouraged them to start just taking your lesson plans and figure out how can we communicate this with the children? How can we connect with the parents? So what happened was we kind of said, think Mr. Rogers, he was always so great at communicating with the children. They felt like he was really talking to them. And the teachers started making videos, even though they felt like that was probably not age appropriate. They were so nervous. But what we found was their creativity was unleashed. They came up with all kinds of great ways to communicate with the children. We started off with putting together packets, and we had the parents pick those up right away in a little pickup line the day before we started, on Tuesday of last week. Then on Wednesday, we actually started our virtual schooling for little ones. They had in the packets things like Play-Doh, and they had some activities of things to put together that the teachers had planned to use in class. Then the teachers shared directions with the parents on how to do these activities, made videos of an actual circle time of a teacher teaching the Bible story, of singing the song with the children. One teacher lives on a farm, and she did hers outside, showing them animals and doing Mary Had a Little Lamb with showing them the sheep and different things like that. So it's been really exciting to see. The best thing has been seeing the children respond, and that they really do need to maintain the relationship with the teacher, so we're ready to pick up where we left off when we go back to school. They have we've seen videos of the children watching the teacher and being excited and doing the actions to the songs and everything. So we feel like we have learned a lot, and we have made the best of the situation and can't wait to get the children back with us. I didn't give the context that we're in because we are in a school where we are part of a school from 12 months through 12th grade. We are extremely supported by administration all the way through and very much a part of the school, and it has allowed us to feel very affirmed and that what we're doing is important, that we are contributing just like all the other teachers. And the little children are excited because they have a teacher calling them and getting them homework and things like that, just like their big brothers and sisters. So God is bringing good through this difficult situation.
Amen. Amen. Well, we have over 400 folks on this town hall right now, and a number of them are from around the world, not the least of which is Josh Keegan. Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself, and Josh is coming to us from overseas.
Thanks, David. My name is Josh Keegan. I'm the superintendent of ISC schools here in China. We have, and I'm here in China right now as well. We have 6 schools across China. Our last day of school was January 17th, and we've not been back to campus since that time. So our situation is a little bit different than on what you guys are dealing with, and in many ways, maybe we started this process a few months before you, but you're very much where we were in the early days of this. So unique also to our situation is our students are coming from all over the world in these international schools, and our teachers are from all over the world as well. And when this outbreak happened here in China and schools were closed down, we were right in the middle of our Chinese New Year holiday. And so again, we have people that are displaced, families and also teachers back in their home countries or that were actually on holiday. And so that has been a part of our challenge. Within a few days of learning that the schools would not be allowed to open back on campus after the Chinese New Year holiday, we put into motion plans for doing virtual schooling like all of you are doing. And amazingly, I think that all things considered, it's gone really well. And I think like many of you, and I see the comments that are coming through, I think more of the struggle for schools, for parents and for students has been at the early end. Our youngest students and their families have had some of the most struggle. And the question of refunds, you know, what we're here to discuss today has happened more at that level. But overall, we've had a lot of success. With our older students and with teachers doing great work. And like others have said, the situation has presented opportunity for us to do things that we weren't planning on doing, that we've talked about in the past, but this has really forced us to jump into using online platforms more successfully. And so all of our schools already had some things in place. And so there's a variety of platforms that we're using across the system. But I would say, yeah, there's lots of examples of great work that teachers are doing. One thing that I would just offer from our perspective as we've been doing this longer is that our initial decision was to delay school for 2 weeks. We didn't get an official word from our government authorities about when we would be able to reopen. But we had decided that we would delay for 2 weeks, not realizing how long this process would be. And I have no idea what will happen in the US or for participants that are coming from other countries, no idea what governments will say as this situation continues. It's hard to predict, but it's very possible that you could be in this for more of a long haul than a short-term solution. And the energy to sustain that has been one of the questions and the hurdles that we've had to overcome. So as we have, you know, after a month, we're looking at how can we take a little bit of a break from this because the work is really taxing on parents. That's a lot of the feedback that we've gotten is parents have had to become much more involved in their children's learning, which is both a great thing and a hardship for them. And also we've now been discussing as we're now in 2 months of this is how can we re-energize the platform and how can we just re-engage students? How can we make, as we're in this for the long haul, how can we really work to make this as engaging as possible for our teachers, students, and families? So those are some of the things that we are dealing with at this stage of the development of this program. But I think like everyone else, we're seeing a lot of opportunity. We are seeing successes. We've had a lot of challenges. But overall, it's been really interesting to see the opportunities that have risen out of the circumstances. Thanks so much for including us in the call, and happy to answer questions later from our visitors on the call. Thank you.
Excellent. Josh, thanks so much. What an outstanding panel we have today. We also have 2 of our very own experts from ACSI on the panel today to offer helpful legal insights. In-house counsel, Philip Scott, if you'll give everyone a wave, Philip, and our Director for Legal Legislative Issues, Dr. Tom Cathy. Thank you again, panelists, for joining us today.
And I'd like to thank you as well. Love to get on to these questions. We're going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes getting your questions answered. And so our first question is for probably most for our legal legislative panelists. How should Christian schools be handling tuition since the environment that parents signed up for has changed? Do we have a legal obligation to the environment we promised them?
Yeah, so I'll jump on that and see if we can tie in a few of the other questions that are similar as well. I think the framework you want to look at is going with the mentality that we're still providing a grade level appropriate education, right? So at the end of this school year, your sixth grader is still going to come out with a sixth grade education. And fundamentally, that's what you've contracted for. So when we're talking K-12 specifically, parents are contracting with the school, right? And tuition dollars are in exchange for an appropriate grade level education. And so you're still providing that. I think that's the messaging that you want to provide. The school building is not the school, right? That is not the education. I realize that plays into it, and parents choose schools for different reasons, but I think that's the messaging. To the specifics of the question, you know, there are times when, let's say, I'll just use the example of a special needs program. You make the promise that we have, you know, 3 certified para-educators that are going to be working with students. We have a specialized program in this, and that's part of the reason that the family picks your school. You know, some of that may come into play, but what I would say is I think for a number of things, you're still able to provide the gist of what they want it, which is an appropriate grade level education. And so, you know, if I think it's going to be a case-by-case basis on what you're promised and what you've provided to the families. I would say at most maybe a discount, but I would not start there. And I'd also give caution that if some of the questions are about, you know, do we do some discounts in early April for what's going on? My caution there is if this continues to the end of the school year or even further, you may have potentially bound yourself. The expectation is going to be set that you've now got a discounted tuition rate for the rest of the year type of thing. So I would caution, do those carefully. And that's essentially the messaging I would provide. The teachers are still working, right? They're still providing lessons. They're still doing curriculum development. They're still, you know, they're not handing out worksheets. The grades are still coming back. And so then at the end of the year, you can show that student has had progression that is appropriate for their grade level. You can show things that you would typically, you know, we refer to as our cum folders, right? So their grades, any kind of standardized testing you've been doing to show their progression, any of those other aspects. And that's one of the reasons I suggest you be careful on what you cut out, or at least make that decision now of what you cut out, because some of that can go to bolster your argument that the tuition is still due. I have more to say, but I'll stop there.
David, the next question.
Thank you, Philip. Thanks, Cindy. Our next question is related to our younger learners. And here it is. We plan to be closed for 2 weeks, but it looks like it will be longer. We're providing K through 8th grade education with Google Classroom, but that's not realistic for preschool. Should we charge less tuition for K through 8 if we need to keep the school in an online format longer than 2 weeks? What do you recommend for preschool?
I'll hit that from a legal standpoint. Others can feel free to jump in from what they've been doing, practically speaking. I think EE can be a little bit of a more difficult aspect to look at. I think Jay laid it out well, though, that you're still providing an educational service. And so I think it's going to be case-by-case basis. You look at what you are providing and what you have put forward to the families. What are they contracting with you for services for? You know, I don't think there's any doubt part of what you're providing is childcare, and then depending on the family, they may look at that as the bigger deal than the educational aspect. But there's the academic aspect. If you're still doing academics to those younger kids, I think it's a conversation of, do we want to give some discount, or if we're closed our doors altogether, do we stop the payments there that families are giving us? But that's going to have a correlation to your staff as well. So is it appropriate to do a discount there? I think there could be. I think, again, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Look at what you are providing and what you're doing. Further, and I know this isn't true everywhere, there's been orders, stay-in-place orders and the rest, but in a number of places, the county health departments have actually come back to the early ed programs asking that they open back up to provide childcare for things like first responders and other aspects. A lot of the K-12 closures also don't directly apply to the early ed, and so there's a whole framework of things we'd suggest you take a look at. But there is the potential, even if your K-12 is closed, that you could open up your EE. Maybe not from a, you want to have the discussion, are we doing full-blown EE again, or is this more childcare in the meantime? But those are some of the aspects I would suggest from a legal standpoint. Harriet or others may speak to the other aspects.
Yeah, any other thoughts from an early ed perspective? Josh, I know this is a really hot topic where you are, correct?
It is. I mean, first I would just acknowledge that it is, our experience has been that it is more challenging to offer appropriate early education resources using online platforms solely. It is more challenging. At this point, we've not issued refunds. We have been working really hard to provide adequate resources. I think that's been challenging teachers in regard to just being able to work very differently and create things that that are new and that they haven't had to use before. We are at this point considering heading into the fourth quarter that some options like half day instead of full day to just basically accommodate for the learning that we do think is appropriate for kids to be doing. We don't want them spending all day in front of a screen. And so making it a little bit easier for parents. Our younger students are not able to do the kind of independent work, which makes up a lot of what the online learning environment requires. And so there's just an acknowledgement that, yeah, this isn't a lot of what we're asking students to do is not going to be as appropriate for our younger students. And we've had to seek some advice from early childhood experts and just try to get a better handle on what should we be expecting, what's appropriate, what's in the best interest of our students, and slightly modify our expectations. And now heading into the fourth quarter, rethinking what that would look like in terms of tuition and possible refunds. We have like about 5% withdrawal at this point from our schools, which makes sense because our parents are overseas and maybe not returning to China, but most of that has been in our early childhood.
Thank you, Josh. That question actually did come up in terms of how much screen time early education students should be spending, and even primary grade. So you kind of answered another question while you commented on that one. The next question for the panelists has to do with specials. How are you handling your specials classes, and how are you giving some kind of ROI on that? Music, phys ed, those kinds of things. Anyone? Mark, you're muted. You got to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I must have hit it twice. My apologies. What I was saying was that I was just talking to my art and PE teacher about what they were doing, and so rather timely question. My PE teacher, he has a class on Zoom, and all of the students, they go through whatever exercise activities they are, and one of the assignments they had was to let the others know how they're being active. And so with the little ones, it was about gross motor skills and fine motor skills. And then he also has posted some videos that they could watch, like little dances and things like that for the younger kids. And then their parents can upload that into the LMS, what they're doing, if they wanted to share that. The art teacher, she's been asking students to watch a certain artist, so she'll have a video through that, and so she goes through the history of the art. She might have like some documentary that she has for that for the upper grades, and then she also has a Zoom meeting in which she talks to them and they show them the art live while they're doing that and work on that, and she just makes sure that she's using things that are readily available in the house.
Great. Anyone else have something to share along that line?
I'll just say something quick. I have 5 children, and I would say that some of the best, and they're all involved in doing home-based learning right now. And some of the best examples I've seen are from the specials teachers. So the PE, music, choir, the art classes, some of the teachers there have done an amazing work of transferring what they're doing in the classroom to an online platform. So there definitely are ways to do that. And again, even as we're asking our kids to leverage technology, our teachers can do that as well in collaboration with others from all over the world, learning about best practice, getting ideas that they may not have already. There definitely are some ways to do some creative and very collaborative things with our specials classes.
Chuck, it looks like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we've been a little slower with implementation with specials electives just because we've asked our teachers to focus on, those core academic content. We felt like our parents were getting overloaded in that first week with emails and everything you can imagine. And so we're sending them more project-based stuff rather than having them in a set class for those classes. So even during our structured class schedules that a student may be in 6 through 12, they're not taking PE right now. If this thing continues, we will add that as part of the curriculum, but we did sense that our parents were on overload just with core content that we were trying to accomplish.
Okay.
One of the things that we're working on right now, the same thing with Chuck, we're in week 1, so we're trying not to overload our families, but one of the things we're working on right now, just to kind of stimulate thought, we've talked with a local nursing home, and their musical therapy is completely shut down. And so one of the things we're brainstorming with them is if we can somehow get a small group, like a quartet of our orchestra, and get them to open their windows and go perform out in the parking lot with 4 of our kids. Let them practice separately and then come together and practice and play together. Would that be a way in a week or so when we could, or 2, when we could really, they could play together, they could practice for that, and then they could minister to these kids, or do the same thing with the choir as well. So those are a couple of things that we're trying to think about. And the other thing is it's really giving us an opportunity to think outside the box with regard to service learning and how what we're teaching our kids in the context of this virtual environment, they can then take and use in appropriate ways, practicing physical distancing in the current context, but do it to be a blessing and serve outside the 4 walls of their house and our school.
Excellent, excellent. Here's another question, and Jay had touched on some of what you shared earlier. Can we share ideas of how we're repurposing our staff whose jobs aren't currently applicable? Jay shared a neat idea, and I'd love to hear more.
Hey, I met with all of the schools here in Colorado yesterday, and that came up in a discussion, and one of the leaders shared that they were taking all of their support staff and repurposing them, and they were calling a redeployment of their support staff there. And the main job was to support the teachers. They had some doing one-on-one tutoring by Zoom or whatever with students who might be struggling. They They had a couple people in the office making copies and scanning and sending out things to teachers that as they needed them. If they wanted to produce something that was there, they could make that and produce it for them, send it out to them. They had put together some families or some support staff that were being ambassadors and calling every family just to touch base with them. They had every department submit task lists of things that needed to be done in their departments. And then the secretary was taking that list, and then again, almost like a temp agency, she was deploying different support staff to do those projects and to help support. And their school was continuing to pay the support staff and giving them jobs to do like that.
In addition to what Tom just said, one of the things that I've done is I've told my nurses I want them to now be the experts for our school on COVID-19, and I want them to research it. I want them to be better, to be more knowledgeable than anybody in our school, except maybe the doctor families, and then to contact our families, check up on them, talk to them, answer questions that they may have, be able to give them just practical advice along the way, not, refer them when it's appropriate, do all of the things that are appropriate there, but to be a resource to them in that regard. The other thing is that I've done is had one of my employees that I've repurposed be responsible for reaching. I've got a ton of alumni who are college students in the area who are now home doing college because all the universities have closed. And so I've got her compiling a list of college students who would be willing to go and do their online stuff in the homes of some of my working families who just can't get off work, who have to work and have elementary age kids and need a sitter / tutor who can work with the kids in the house. But that's a good way to deploy my alumni who are basically, I've got a daughter who has Tuesday, Thursday classes, and I say tongue in cheek, she's pretty useless on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so it's a good way to deploy her in a way that families can use in just a small one-to-one context.
Okay, next question has to do with the schools that do not pay into the unemployment compensation package because they're nonprofits. They want to know if there's anything that their employees are eligible for, should they be laid off. Is there anything that they can get to help them? That's the question.
Cindy, right now there is a bill before Congress that you're hearing about. It's called the CARES Act, and that does have some unemployment pieces in it. It possibly may have, if it doesn't get stripped out, some unemployment help for nonprofits or those religious organizations that might be exempt from unemployment. But right now, most states, most state church schools are exempt from unemployment. And so again, but then independent schools in some states do have to either pay unemployment or do the reimbursement method of unemployment. And so again, we're just watching and waiting on that bill. But of course, we sent out a memo last week about the Emergency Paid Leave Act and Sick Paid Leave Act, and also the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act that does provide some benefits for those that would qualify. And the legal legislative team sent out a memo last week. We'll send out more, hopefully by Friday, updating some more information on that. And then as soon as this new bill passes, we will know more about it. We'll make sure that we get information out if it does help on unemployment. One of the pieces of this bill also would give a check to every family in America. That piece is in there. There's also small business loans that would help some of our schools maybe need to borrow money to help pay tuition or help pay salaries and things like that with some forgiveness. So we're watching all those, and as soon as we know more, we will get out that information to our schools.
Great. Thank you, Tom. And I think we have time for one more question.
All right. Do we need to provide specials to elementary students as well as core subjects, i.e. art, music, etc.?
I think we hit on some of that earlier. I think the more you can do to make it like your typical offering, the better. I don't think that it's a requirement necessarily. Again, it's going back to what's the ultimate thing you're giving, and that's a grade level appropriate education. From a practical standpoint, I think a lot of the speakers have already hit that. In some cases, it's overload, particularly early on. Others, Jay was mentioning some creative ways they're considering tying in or project-based. I think one of the questions that's come up a lot has been employment, and what do we do with employees if they're hourly? We don't have time to go through a whole thing. We do have a document on the website. Be glad to share with you. You can look at, but they're hourly without a contract. You don't have to pay them for hours they're not working. I'm not suggesting that that's the way to go, but that is a standard. For those that are exempt without a contract, you can, if they are working at any point within a week, technically you're supposed to pay them for that week. But if they're not going to do work for that week, you can, through certain ways of doing this and considerations, essentially furlough them, if you will, or rotate your staff, particularly the hourly staff, rotate them in and out. There are contracts bring up a whole different set of problems and issues, and essentially you want to look to see what in your contract has modified those basic rules that we just covered. Again, don't have time to go through all of that, but you'd want to see whether you have the ability within your contract language to move people around or to not pay them for a period. Or if you're going to do that and you don't have that language, do you have a defense to doing that? But all that to say, you can also lower people's pay, particularly the hourly folks, for a period. You've got to treat everyone equally, but you can modify the pay rate as long as they're still within minimum wage. For the salaried folks, teachers, again, if you've got a contract, that's something you're going to have to deal with. If not, you do have some flexibility there as well. Again, not enough time to go into all the details. Be glad to discuss those with you on the phone if need be, or send you to other guidance.
Okay, I'm going to have this one last question that was asked here. Have any of you sent parents a letter proactively stating that you're not going to be refunding tuition or discounting it in any way?
I can speak into that if you want. We have not sent a letter. We've sent videos, we've sent letters, but it's all focused on how academic program is moving forward. Now, we're entering into the season. I know we're behind our West Coast schools and Josh, who've been dealing with this for weeks. So we're just starting to get the emails of concern. So our standard answer with that has been, we're doing our best to offer all of our academic programming. And for those situations where people are seeking assistance, we're going to help them on an individual basis as we finish out the year. Obviously, we're thinking about the upcoming school year because I think that's where we'll feel the most ripple effect with enrollment. We'll see how that goes, but hopefully not. But that's what we're also focusing on as we go through the contract phase for staff as we look towards next year as well. So in answer to your question, no, we have continued to send out messages, but it's all about all the things that we're offering and continuing to evolve as well with chapel programming and letting them see the value. And it's amazing to see the way that teachers begin to innovate within their classrooms. Next week, we're going to do, for culture, we're going to do somewhat of a homecoming week, theme days where kids can dress up, trying to build school culture. We just want them to feel that value of community and fellowship. So our constant theme is let's finish strong. So nothing collectively we've sent out about tuition refunds.
I love that answer, Chuck. I think that, keep it positive. Don't put those thoughts in their head, but help remind them constantly of all that you're doing to provide a quality education. So we're out of time for our questions. We encourage you, though, to continue the conversations on ACSI community group thread dedicated to this discussion. We recognize that many of you created resources that can be a tremendous blessing to others on this call and beyond. In addition, we have the link to the Zoom meeting, your regional Zoom meetings, right after this, and Dr. Balick's going to tell you about that, but you can find a link to our discussion thread on our coronavirus homepage at acsi.org. We know that teachers are creatively reaching and teaching students also. So we would like to highlight your teachers and their ideas through social media. So please post to the hashtag #MyChristianSchool and show us what your teachers are doing. This will be a great encouragement to teachers all around the globe. As this hashtag builds, it'll be a great place to get creative ideas from one another.